Welcome to American Pulse. النهارده حلقة خاصة من مصر خصيصا لمشاهدين برنامج النبض الأمريكي. طبعا عندنا النهارده حدث مهم، زيارة نائب الرئيس الأمريكي مايك بانس للقاهرة في جولته لمنطقة الشرق الأوسط. واحنا طبعا عارفين ان الفترة اللي فاتت كان في نوع من الصراعات والكونفليكت السياسية والتصريحية للرئيس الأمريكي دونالد ترامب، وخاصة عن طريق ما حدث في مشكلة الفلسطينية في القضية الفلسطينية ومحاولة نقل السفارة الأمريكية للقدس ومحاولة إطلاق القدس كعاصمة لدولة إسرائيل. وده طبعا أثار غضب العديد من العرب والعديد من المصريين والعديد من كل ما هو يعرف حقيقة هذه المنطقة وهذه القضية، وعارفين كويس قوي انه طبعا وقت مش مناسب جدا لاندلاع هذه الصراعات، ووقت مش مناسب لاندلاع مشاكل من هذا القبيل. الحقيقة مصر قدرت ان هي تتعامل مع هذا الملف بشكل قوي جدا وبشكل محترم جدا. مصر قدرت تدين هذه الخطوة من الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية عن طريق القنوات الشرعية في الأمم المتحدة وفي المجتمعات الدولية والمحافل الدولية. أسئلة كتيرة بتتراود مشاهدين البرنامج وناس كتير بتسألنا طب إيه دور مصر دلوقتي مع العلاقات المصرية الأمريكية، وهل هي تأثرت بهذه المواقف الغريبة الحقيقة من الرئيس الأمريكي دونالد ترامب؟ هل احنا بندفع فاتورة غيرنا؟ طب دورنا نعمل ايه؟ طيب ايه الحل؟ حاجات كتير يعني في هذه القضية. طبعا احنا مش قادرين نقول ان في حلول قطعيه، لكن يمكن احنا اتحطينا في مواقف لا نحسد عليها، لكن الحقيقه حنكه وحكمه الاداره المصريه قدرت تتعامل مع الملف بمنتهى الاحترافيه. زياره مايك بانس زياره مهمه لمصر من رايي. علاقات المصريه الامريكيه مهمه جدا، ولكن لازم دايما نبقى عارفين ان لينا تصريحات قويه، لازم نبقى عارفين ان احنا مواقفنا ثابته ما بتتغيرش، ويمكن كل المجتمع العربي والوطن العربي يعرف الكلام دوت كويس جدا. النهارده معايا احد المحامين الامريكيين، وهو اكشلي نقيب المحامين في نيويورك، في نقابه المحامين في نيويورك عن غرفه شمال افريقيا والشرق الاوسط، فهو فاهم كويس جدا في هذا الملف. يعني يشرفني ان يبقى معايا مايكل يونغ، هو محامي مشهور جدا في الولايات المتحده الامريكيه، وراجل بيهتم جدا بمنطقه الشرق الاوسط، وليه باع كبير في محاولات طرح حلول الدولتين، حل الدولتين للمشكله الفلسطينيه. طبعا يعني يهمنا ان احنا نعرف ايه وجهة نظره عن هذه القضية، يهمنا نعرف وجهة نظره عن حضور نائب الرئيس الامريكي مايك بانس للقاهرة النهاردة، ويهمنا نعرف كمان من وجهة نظره ايه مستقبل العلاقات المصرية الامريكية. فدعوني ان انا استقبله في البرنامج. هاي مستر يونغ.
Hello.
Welcome to the show. Welcome to American Pulse in Cairo.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time, and I would like to make sure that our viewers understand that you are the co-chair of the MENA Committee, which is the Middle Eastern and North African Affairs at the New York City Bar Association, as well as you're an attorney. So if you can give us a little brief of your background, that would be great.
Sure. So I've been a lawyer for about almost 40 years now. The last 30 years...
Only 4 years?
Only 40 years. The last 30 years of my practice have been as a mediator and arbitrator of civil disputes in New York, working with a firm that I was one of the founders of called JAMS. And that's what I do professionally. I have an interest in the Middle East and have been involved in various advocacy groups with respect to the Israeli-Palestinian issue. And as you noted, over the last 4 years have been a member of the MENA Committee of the City Bar Association, and this past year was appointed co-chair of that committee.
That's great. Mike Pence is here today in Cairo.
Yes.
What do you think?
I think it's probably going to be a non-event.
Okay.
I think he was scheduled to come earlier this month. It got postponed when President Trump...
Actually, it was scheduled to come last month, at the end of last month, I believe.
The end of last month?
Yes.
It was postponed after the president announced his view on the status of Jerusalem.
Yes.
So I don't think this was a trip purposely set up to assuage negative feelings, but I think that's what the vice president is probably doing here in Cairo and probably doing the same thing in Oman. He will also be visiting Israel, and I assume the reception will be somewhat different.
Since you have been working as a mediator for so many years, so maybe we should invite you to solve the Palestinian-Israeli problems that we have been inheriting for many, many years. I wanted to get your take on the problem, and I want you to try to explain it to the viewers from your perspective. How do you see this, and how do you see the evolution of this problem, and where we're standing right now, and finally, if you think the President of the United States' stance on this topic today is appropriate or not?
Well, I would say this is a problem where the stars have never been aligned. And by that I mean, at one point in time, there was probably more receptivity on the Israeli side to a solution. That probably was in the mid-90s into the early 2000s.
So the Israelis wanted to solve this problem in the mid-90s?
I think so. I think that's what you saw.
They had more, they were open more for negotiations. Is that what you're saying?
They were both open more for negotiations, and as I understand it, during the conference at Taba in 2000, and then in 2006 when there were direct negotiations between the Israeli Prime Minister Olmert and Mahmoud Abbas, there were solutions offered by the Israelis that were much more forthcoming than the solutions they're willing to offer today. Unfortunately, at that point in time, the Palestinian leadership, for whatever reason, wasn't prepared to accept those offers.
They turned them all down, right?
They turned them all down. You could argue some of that is because of them and deficiencies in the leadership, and some of it is because the rest of the Arab world wasn't as supportive as it might have been, or the polity behind the Israeli Palestinian public wasn't as supportive as it might have been. But for whatever reason, those moments passed. And over the last 4 or 5 years, we've had a very conservative, almost right-wing leadership in Israel, and they are now the problem, much more resistant to any kind of solution than the prior governments had been.
Well, this is a very tough news to hear. I think at all levels, and I might have had this discussion with you multiple times in New York, we want to solve this problem, and I feel that what the Palestinians have been offered in the past and what they have been asking for today, they're not able to get anymore. What can we do with the right wing and the people in the government of Israel today to try to get them to their position on the 90s? Is there anything that could be done at this point?
Well, I would say there are two things. One is there has to be a recognition on the Israeli part that the two-state solution is really the only solution that's possible.
Yeah.
The alternative is continued occupation, which is not palatable and probably not something that can be sustained. The other alternative is what we call a one-state solution, which would be Israel, sort of within the Green Line, and then incorporating the West Bank becomes Israel, and the Israeli Palestinians, or the Palestinians in the West Bank, would be given full citizenship in Israel. From the Israeli point of view, that probably is not palatable, because that would mean the Palestinians would have full rights to vote, and if they
vote them out,
they could vote them out. So there has to be a recognition at some point from the Israeli perspective that the two-state solution is the only solution. I think the other thing is there has to be outside pressure. The Americans used to be applying that pressure. It's not clear with President Trump they are doing that. The moderate Arab states such as Egypt and Jordan have been very constructive. Saudi Arabia may be more constructive going forward. And if they could provide that kind of pressure, perhaps there'll be some movement on the Israeli part. The other thing that's very important to note is that Prime Minister Netanyahu in Israel is under investigation for corruption.
Yes.
If he were to be indicted and leave office, there's some possibility the government will change in a way that may be more conducive to peace.
Well, I want to stress on this point because I don't know if you recall the first visit of the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to the White House when
Yes.
Trump came into the office back in January of 2017. I remember that press conference vividly because it seemed like that he was coming as a debt collector. He was coming to collect something that he was promised from Trump before, or it just seemed to be. I'm just reading through the lines that President Trump, before at the election time, he had promised the Israelis that he would do such and such to try to support them in the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. And I remember President Trump, he was swaying with his body in a very non-presidential appearance, and he's saying, "Bibi, would you please hold off on the occupation for a little bit until we talk further more about this," as if like he was like trying to negotiate a construction deal. And I really, at that time, it struck me that I'm afraid that something really wrong is going on, and I felt like Netanyahu was not prepared to hear anything about the two-state solutions, because President Trump said, we're okay as Americans with the two-state or one-state solution, and he stressed more on the one-state solution. And I'm like, when I heard this the first time, I'm like, you know, if there's a one-state solution, I think that would be very tricky, because, you know, neither the Palestinians nor the Israelis would let the other party live peacefully in a way. You know, everybody's scared, everybody's going to be on their toes, and everybody's very cautious from the other group. So I agree with you 100% that the two-state solution is probably the only right solution. But what happened with why American administration has not been putting such pressure on the Israelis? Is it because that President Trump is already suffering some internal problems with his internal policies within the U.S., and he's trying to seek help from the Israeli lobbyists maybe?
I think what we've seen over the last year has been an evolution and sort of some shifting in position on the part of the administration. I think when he first came into office, the assumption on the part of a lot of people who watched the situation was that President Trump was going to be supportive of the Israelis 100%, and anything and everything they wanted, he would be responsive to. That's why I think you saw what you just said when you observed when Prime Minister Netanyahu first visited Washington.
Yes.
Over the period of time since then, there was some sense that maybe something constructive could come out of Washington. The president assigned his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, to explore the possibility of a New Deal or some kind of other solution. And at least everybody thought that Kushner and his chief lieutenant, Jason Greenblatt, were very conscientious and were listening well and maybe coming up with some solutions. But I think over the last 2-3 months, people have begun to feel that that's probably not going to bear fruit. And some of the more hawkish elements in the Trump administration have become ascendant. Most importantly, the current U.S. ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, who's very supportive of the settlements, not very supportive of a two-state solution. His voice has become more powerful, right? And aggressive. That's probably the right word. Mm-hmm. So that's not very positive. The fact that President Trump announced what he did with respect to the status of Jerusalem is a reflection probably of keeping a promise that he made during the campaign.
He likes to make sure that people know that he fulfilled his promises.
Exactly.
And I think this is a little dangerous when we play with politics, right?
Well, the only explanation, a lot of people were trying to explain that move in more strategic ways, and when it comes down to it, the only way you could understand his announcement at that point in time was a reflection of a political payback to certain Jewish elements. But in addition to the Jewish elements in the U.S., there's also the evangelical Christian elements, which are very supportive of Israel and of the current government of Israel. So he was sort of playing to his base as well.
Do you think we can top this also with the fact that the Prime Minister of Israel is under corruption investigation, as you mentioned earlier? So maybe he wanted to achieve some sort of a victory to try to sway people attention and divert all the attention from his corruption charges and try to appear to be the victorious leader that was able to get Jerusalem to the Jews?
I think that's been the result. I think that was it was like a gift to the Prime Minister. I don't think the President was motivated by that reason.
Okay.
But I think the result was it was a gift to the Prime Minister.
It got in his favor.
It helped him a lot. Mm-hmm. Now, having said that, it hasn't stopped the investigations, and the investigations will result in what they will result. There was some sense that it was clearly going to result in an indictment. It's been slow in happening, so there's some question being raised now as to what is going on and whether the Attorney General in Israel will indict. But that's a big wild card. We'll have to see what happens.
Egypt has been in a position, and that's maybe what I said earlier in the Arabic introduction. I think Egypt was placed or found itself in a place that they don't want to be in. One, they can't, they don't want to lose the Egyptian-American relationship. They don't want to ruin the Egyptian-Israeli relationship, but at the same time, they can't give up the rights and try to help the fellow Palestinians to try to settle this case. What do you think of Egyptian position and what Egypt has done in the UN, and was that the right thing to do, was the wrong thing to do? Just what's your perspective on this?
Well, I think Egypt and Jordan have both been playing a very positive role over the last number of years. They each have a relationship with the U.S., they each have a relationship with Israel, and at the same time they have a level of commitment to, as you say, supporting the Palestinian effort to achieve statehood. So they're perfectly situated to try to be an intermediary and apply pressure and be helpful. You throw on top of that the whole issue of the regional security situation and the fact that Jordan and Egypt, as well as Saudi Arabia, have a consistency of interest with Israel in terms of trying to keep the Iranian influence lower and prevent terrorism. And so there's sort of a way that all these countries are relating, and I think the Egyptians in particular have been making an effort to push the Israelis in the right direction. I think the role they played at the UN with the resolution was appropriate. It was a reasonable thing to do, and at the same time they've maintained their relationship with Israel in terms of strategic goals and military issues. The other thing I would say from the Egyptian perspective is the Egyptians also, it's been known, to be trying to help the Palestinian leadership come together and mediate between Hamas and Fatah.
So I would like to talk more about the Egyptian role with the Palestinians, Hamas and Fatah right after the break. This is a very important topic, so I want to make sure that we cover it completely and fully. So dear viewers, we'll see you right after the break. Welcome back to American Pulse. Privileged and happy and honored to have Michael Young on the show today. And Mr. Young, we went out to the break and we said that we're going to talk about the Egyptian role in getting the Palestinians together, Fatah and Hamas. And please let me know, elaborate more on what you think of the two entities and how marvelous was the effort of the Egyptians to get these two people together, because I believe that this is 30 or 35% of the problem.
It's a significant problem. Even at the time when it looked possible that Israel might be able to negotiate a two-state solution with the Fatah leadership, Mahmoud Abbas, there was always the question about what about Hamas and what about Gaza? And Gaza is clearly a problem given the living conditions there, given the desperation a lot of the people feel, and the risk that every year or two there's going to be some sort of outbreak of violence. People have disagreements about this, but my own view is the effort to get Hamas and Fatah together is positive. It presents an opportunity to really have a solution if the Israelis could negotiate one, because then you'd have both Fatah and Hamas together.
One side, right? Rather than, like the way I always simply explain it is like a piece of land, instead of having three groups fighting over it, now we have only two groups, right?
Right, so it's positive.
So it's very positive. At least we narrow down the challenges, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. But the problem is that Fatah and Hamas have very different views of the world, and it's proven very, very difficult for them to meld those views together and to come to a sustainable agreement. We thought back in the summer and in the early fall there had been a breakthrough.
September, right?
September.
Exactly. It was in September, and I remember it was one day before President Sisi arrived to New York to attend the UN.
Right.
And I remember, and I thought it was a revolutionary news that I heard, and unfortunately this was never covered in the American media. I mean, I've never seen, they didn't shed enough light on this important progress in getting Fatah and Hamas together on one side.
Well, I think partly that's because Hamas is so demonized in the American media that it's perceived that you're legitimizing Hamas to the extent it's sort of incorporated really into the Palestinian leadership.
That makes sense. Especially they didn't have the best track history, right?
No, they don't have the best track history. And I think that's from a lot of reasons, a lot of perspectives.
Yes.
But unfortunately, since September, we're still waiting for the day to hear that the actual agreement has been finalized and implemented. And part of the tension is that the Hamas incentive is to have the PLO, have Fatah actually take over, the Palestinian Authority, take over the administrative functions. And from the PA's perspective, from Fatah's perspective, it is to have Hamas truly committed to renouncing violence and to finding a solution. And in both instances, it's very hard to achieve those goals. But I think it's fair to say that a lot of the credit does belong to the Egyptians for the intermediary or the mediator role they've been playing, as well as the Egyptians have been playing a very good role in trying to make sure that the problems in Gaza don't blow up and don't result in more violence. So there's a lot of reasons to be thankful to the Egyptian role.
Thank you. Do you think Egypt will suffer some relationship pains because of its position and what they have done towards this the Palestinian-Israeli conflict and the announcement of the President Trump that he would like to announce Jerusalem to be the capital of Israel, and which takes off a lot of negotiation cards from the table. I'm afraid that the American-Egyptian relationship will suffer some hiccups after we thought that things were better after Obama's time. What do you think?
I think the use of the word hiccups is a good word. I think the relationship is strong enough that it'll be sustained. I think there's a strategic imperative from both the Egyptian and the American perspective to stay close with each other. There's a lot of fear of the spread of Iranian influence.
Yes.
And there's, obviously concerns on everybody's part about what's going on in Syria and essentially both the disintegration of that country as well as the ascendance of Iranian influence in Syria. And from that perspective, the Americans and the Egyptians share a common goal, and that goal is probably more important than the problems connected to the Palestinian-Israeli situation. So the Palestinian-Israeli situation is a problem that needs to be rectified. It needs to be resolved. But I think from the perspective of most of the regional players, it's not as important as making sure that the Iranian influence doesn't spread.
Fair enough. President Trump has been having quite attention all over the world because of his statements.
Right.
And you know, obviously, I supported him initially, and I wanted a change in the administration, but now it's just very difficult for me to explain what he says and, you know, some of his actions, and where is this taking the image of the United States all over the world from you?
Well, I think it's unfortunate because in some respects, the people who are like our Secretary of Defense and our National Security Advisor, and to some extent even our Secretary of State, are very seasoned pros and know what they're doing and are very solid people and diplomats and professionals. So in some respects, the U.S. policy is still very good and reflects what I think you're comfortable with, what I'm comfortable with. It's just unfortunate our president is a little erratic and sometimes says things that are off-putting and sometimes says things that are confusing.
Does he at least mean well, or what do you think?
I'm very cynical about him.
Okay.
I don't know, and that's part of the problem. I mean, the best example is not really the Middle East, it's North Korea.
Yes.
Where he says things, you don't know what it means. You don't know whether...
I have a bigger button, and my button works for the nuclear weapons. It's scary.
Well,
you don't want to provoke a guy that is already causing too much problems, right?
Well, and if you listen to the commentary, you know, some people say, well, it's a good guy, bad guy routine, so he becomes the bad cop. Yeah. And he'll say the things that the good cop won't say, but at the same time, we have a measured response. But then you listen to him sometimes and you say, there's no strategy there. We don't really know what's going on. So the reality is we really don't know what's going on. But we do have some confidence in the fact that, again, the Secretary of State, the National Security Advisor...
So the other institutions are functioning properly, and that hopefully should protect the image of the United States.
And
the relationships.
To a large extent.
To a large extent.
But it is hurting our image in the world. It is clearly hurting our image in the world. He had a good,
I think he still, or he had and still have a good opportunity to try to do what he promised the Americans of making America great again, but we just don't see it. It's, you know, things are falling apart from different angles. Some racial comments, we didn't hear it on tape, but, you know, there's some senators and congressmen attested to hearing it in the closed behind closed doors, and there are some positions he's taking politically that are very scary. So
it's very scary, some of the positions he's taking, some of the statements he's made. Again, I have a level of confidence in our institutions. Okay. But it's clear the American image in the world is somewhat lessened as a result of some of the casually made and inappropriate statements the president makes. Okay. I think one thing to keep in mind is America still is probably the strongest power in the world. Our military is stronger than any other military by far. So at the end of the day, there's still a level of security that exists. But image is important as well.
Very important. Russia and the Russian interference in the American elections, how is that discussed now in the media and the public in the U.S. from your opinion? You think this should be a closed topic and we should just forget about it? We have a president, let's move on, or this is something that needs to be really investigated? And what are the results of the investigation? How far this can go? Would it really get to the president himself? What's your take on this?
Well, I think we have to assume there are certain givens. So the first given is that the intelligence community in the U.S. believes strongly that the Russians interfered in the election of 2016. The Russians clearly were responsible for hacking into the Democratic Party emails and for the distribution of those emails.
But for their defense, they found bad stuff on the Democratic emails, right?
They found bad stuff on what?
They found bad stuff on Hillary.
They found bad stuff on Hillary, and that sort of had the impact on the election.
Yes.
So it's clear something happened, and it's clear, at least to me, and I think to a lot of people, that something needs to be done to prevent that from happening again. And that's sort of what we hoped the congressional committees would be investigating. The problem is because part of what they're investigating is the president and his election campaign's role in the process. It's become very politicized.
Yes.
And some of what we would hope would be recommendations as to how to prevent it from happening hasn't happened. So that's a negative thing.
I understand. So you don't believe that we should just lay off the president if there's information that the Russians hacked the emails?
Well, then I think the question is, if laws were broken,
or impeach him for that. I mean, he does. It's not something he's done personally, right?
Well, we don't know that.
Or at least it appears that way.
It appears that way, but at the same time, it also appears that there's at least a possibility that very senior people in his campaign could have been involved. So I think at a minimum, the special prosecutor needs to finish his job and figure that out. And the special prosecutor also has a role looking at some other issues, and that needs to be looked into.
But for you as an American citizen, you care more for investigation to prevent that from happening in the future rather than just crying over the spilled milk, right?
Well, I also care, as a lawyer, I care that laws don't get broken. Correct. And if laws are broken, the people who broke those laws should be held accountable.
Okay.
I agree with you that it looks like, at least with respect to colluding with the Russians, it is probably not the president as opposed to maybe his son or maybe his son-in-law. Okay. And I think the special prosecutor needs to go as far as he needs to go. I think people also should keep in mind we have a very, very good special prosecutor. This is a man who was the head of the FBI, senior person in the Department of Justice. He's as professional as they come. And he should be allowed to finish his investigation. He's not going to go on a witch hunt. He's going to do what he needs to do. And I don't think he's looking to find a fault with the president. He's just looking to find out what happened.
Do you think some of the media on the right wing, on the other side, that, they're saying that they're personalizing this, these people, the Democrats and the liberals hate the president guts and they don't want him in power, and they're trying to use everything to make sure that they take him down? And they say that, some of them, they say that Mueller is kind of biased by this, and I don't know. What do you think?
Look, it's probably a fair statement that there are elements of the Democratic Party and people on the left who are happy that this is happening and are more interested in seeing the end result being harm or, political harm to the president than they are in seeing the appropriate result. Having said that, I think they can't really criticize Mueller. Again, he is somebody who has a huge amount of credibility. Reputation. Everybody believes that. And what I find somewhat disconcerting is the same Republicans who were very pleased when he was appointed FBI director, when he was very pleased with the job he did when he was in government, for really, with no basis, are taking crack at him today, all politically motivated as well. You really have as good a guy as you can get in that position.
All right, that's fair to say. Thank you very much for that. And enough with the politics. We're going to take another break, and then we're going to talk about your visit to Egypt. So we'll come back. We'll come back to you with the visit and the image and the information that Mr. Michael Young had on Egypt before he comes, and what did he find when he came to Egypt. We'll see you right after the break. Welcome back, and Michael Young, the chairman of the MENA committee in New York City Bar Association, is in Egypt, and he heard things before he comes, but I don't know if they came true. So what did you hear, Mr. Young, and what had you felt before coming here? What brought you here, and what did you find out when you came here?
So Michael, you and I were together about a year ago at a reception sponsored by the Consul General in New York City, the Egyptian Consul General.
Yes.
And if you remember, I was the winner of the raffle.
Yes, the air ticket to Egypt.
Right. So as of then, I said to my wife, I got to go to Egypt. Egypt is a country I've always wanted to visit. Yes. As a child, I was mesmerized, as many children are, by the pyramids and scenes like that.
So this is your first time?
So this is my first time to Egypt. Actually, technically, in 1980, I was in the Sinai.
Okay.
But that was before the Sinai was returned to Egypt.
Okay.
So I was in the Sinai, but it wasn't Egypt at the time. So this is my first time. I decided I had to take advantage of that free air flight. So I decided to go. My wife felt that I shouldn't go, that it was, you know, with reputation. Well, it's not so much the reputation.
It's what's happening, the world events, and you know, the attacks that you hear about here and there, right?
Well, you hear about the attacks, and I read, you know, 2-3 weeks ago about the attack on the Coptic church, which I know you're concerned about.
Correct.
And then at the same time, the U.S. State Department has a travel warning about not coming to Egypt. But I decided that this was the time for me to go.
And you followed your guts, right?
I followed my guts. I followed my my heart, I guess.
Your heart.
And I must say I've had a wonderful time the last few days.
This is great. This is great to hear. You know, before we go in details of what you've done, I just want to know, and I want to tell the viewers of how we're perceived as Egypt abroad, and especially in the U.S., and what makes this image of insecurity, and is it only the news, or do you think that somebody's actively trying to defame Egypt, or is it a lack of marketing from the governmental institutions? What seems to be the problem there? Because obviously you heard something, you felt something different, you followed your heart, you came, and you're really happy. I can see the smile on your face. You really, it's like a dream came true, right? You always wanted to see the pyramids, you always wanted to see Egypt, and it's a beautiful country, as you see. So what are we falling short? What are we doing wrong as Egyptians abroad?
Well, I don't know if it's really a question of fault on the part of the Egyptians or the effort to market the country. I think, you know, Americans have been trained to, number one, you know, follow the State Department warnings. So there's a warning, and that discourages people. I will tell you that when I first called my own travel agent to say I wanted to plan a trip to Egypt, she told me that their policy is not to help people go to countries where there's a State Department warning.
Wow.
Then I think it's not so much, people don't distinguish if there's an attack, a terrorist attack in the Sinai, or if the dangerous places not to go are parts of the Sinai or the Western Desert.
Correct.
People don't distinguish between that and Cairo.
Correct.
And so when I read into it, I said, you know, every article you read just says Cairo is safe. You can come to Cairo. You can come to Alexandria. You can go down the Nile. You can go to Luxor. You can go to Aswan. Maybe you shouldn't go to parts of the Sinai. Maybe you shouldn't go to the Western Sahara. So I said, well, that's great. I'll go to Cairo.
I'll go to the places where I can go to.
Right.
Yeah.
And but it is, every time there's a report on a terrorist attack, you don't sort of separate it out, and you get nervous.
But you see, there are reports. What bothers me the most is that the same reports are done about the attacks in Paris, but yet tourism has never been affected in Paris. I mean, to the extent that the Egyptian tourism has been affected. What is France doing different?
Well, I think that's a fair point.
Different than what the Egyptians are doing. You know what I mean?
No, I think that's a very fair point, and I think it also may be concerns about going to the Muslim world
Okay.
As an American going into the Muslim world.
Correct.
The fact that, you know, that part of the world may not like Americans,
Okay.
which is different than going to Paris, where obviously people are more comfortable. Americans are more comfortable with Europe and the European cities. I went to London this past summer, maybe a few weeks after there was a terrorist attack on one of the bridges over the Thames. And I know part of my feeling was I have to go to London. I have to show them that I don't, you know, not intimidated. I want to go to London. And I think
It's a statement. You're making a statement.
Right. And I'm not sure I felt the same way about Cairo. I just wanted to come to Cairo, so I came.
You see, every time you say Cairo, you're smiling. You really had a good time.
I've had a great time.
Where did you go?
So I've been to the pyramids. I've been to the Egyptian Museum.
Beautiful. Did you picture the pyramids the way they are, or it was, you know, the eyesight experience is different?
I think it was sort of what I remembered, what I thought it would be.
Okay.
But it just being up front and staying right there. And then I never realized you could go inside the pyramids.
Okay.
And that was both a little scary and exhilarating.
Okay.
And then seeing the mummies at the Egyptian Museum was great.
Amazing, right?
It's amazing. I mean, all that antiquity is just amazing. I went also to some of the other pyramids, not just the ones in Giza, but some of the other ones, the Red Pyramid, the Bent Pyramid. That was fascinating. Some of the Roman ruins and Greek ruins was fascinating. Some of the old palaces I went to. I went to Old Cairo today and walked around the bazaar.
Beautiful.
I went to the Citadel and the Alabaster Mosque.
You've been to places more than I did.
I've also had a good tour guide who's...
That's good. That's
so I've had a great time.
Would you come back again?
Definitely.
Oh,
definitely.
Would you bring your fearful wife from Egypt to come to...
I think I will encourage her strongly.
Okay, very good.
And plus I must say, the food's been great and the Egyptians have been really friendly.
Thank you.
It's really very, very nice.
Have you felt that they're welcoming you and they've been helping in places where you are?
Everybody's been very friendly. You know, sometimes you go to a country and people are less than friendly.
Yes.
And I mean, I don't speak any Arabic. I understand a little Arabic, but I really don't speak it. But that's not been an obstacle. We sort of look at each other and figure it out, and people tell me what to do. Okay. I told you the other night I got caught in a huge traffic jam around the mosque, yes, celebrating the birthday of Ali Hussein.
Yeah.
And just being part of the street scene was just an incredible experience.
Yes.
You know, so for me, it's been a great experience. I've been very, very happy that I came.
This is great, and I'm sure you're going to talk about it when you go back to New York. And
I definitely will. I will encourage friends to come. And now I have the other half of the country because I didn't get down the Nile to Luxor or to the Valley of the Kings.
Well, wait until you get there. That's a different story.
I'm told that's a wonderful experience.
Yes. Mr. Young, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for being fair and giving chances to see for yourself and evaluate the situation on the ground. Thank you for being understanding of different conflicts in the world and really trying to mediate. You know, we've always talked about this. You and I, we want peace. We don't want. How many people died over the years? Wars, 67, 73, 48, many wars, and people die every other day. It's time for the people to stop and think and reevaluate and see, you know what, we should live in peace. That's what we need.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate your having me, and I share all those sentiments.
Thank you very much, and I'll see you in New York.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you very much, our viewers. It's been a great episode, very informative. We learned a lot from Mr. Michael Young, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
مش باين قوي وانت تايه بين حاجات وعايشها بدماغ فهلاوي عايش بتلعن في الظروف مع ناس هدفها تكون كده ناس قصدها تبقى موقفاك، مش عايزة تبقى فيهم قوي. شوف واقرا في كتاب التاريخ، عمرك ما كنت فيهم غبي. ده انت اللي علمت البشر، شوف عاش في أرضك كام نبي. في ناس بتكره لو تفكر، نفسهم فكرك يقف. عقدة خواجة بيخلقوها وبيبهروك بالأجنبي. الحكاية مش بلون وشكل وهدوم، الحكاية انك قوي رغم الهموم. طلع البطل اللي جواك، يلا قوم انت تقدر تظبط الأحوال بالظبط.
هنشيل بلدنا على كتافنا، مش هنسيبها ومش هنضيعها، ومش هنخلي حد يقدر يضيعها.